Battle through the heavens, Grand World. Chapter 61 Entrust. Boom. Another wave of intense explosions sounded from the distance. Then, a wave of scorching explosive energy swept over like a wild gale. In an instant, all of the towering trees in this area were sliced in half at the waist. Ancient trees flew everywhere, and sand and dust filled the sky. Under the impact of the intense energy storm, two human figures remained as motionless as rocks. One was old and the other was young. The old man wore a calm expression as he placed his hands behind his back. He stood with his head held high and his white robe fluttered in the wind. He looked very cool. The storm did not hurt him at all. As for the young man, both of his hands were tightly holding onto a huge ruler that was inserted into the ground. Under the impact of the storm, it was like a small boat that could be destroyed at any time in the waves. His face was somewhat ferocious due to the pain, and he looked extremely pathetic. Looking closely, it was Elder Yi and Xiaoyan. Phew! The strong wind finally dissipated. Xiaoyan's body tilted and fell weakly to the ground. After a while, the pain from all the wounds on his body made him suck in a breath of cold air. However, it seemed that the pain caused by these injuries was no longer a concern of the former. This thing can torture people to death. His fist smashed heavily on his chest. Xiaoyan said in anger. Ever since he followed his teacher to search for an opportunity to break through to the Emperor realm in the violent energy impact. The power character was like a wolf that had been hungry for several lifetimes. Every time the power character appeared, it was like a wolf that had been hungry for several lifetimes. The powerful destructive force contained within was absorbed by the latter, and the consequences were. It would torture the weak soul of the former until it nearly collapsed. Now, with a slight movement of Xiaoyan's head, the pain that penetrated deep into his soul crazily stimulated his nerves, causing him to wish that he was dead. He was on the verge of going crazy. Although his soul was suffering from a deep torment, Xiaoyan had obtained significant results by seeking a breakthrough in the energy storm. 2 days ago, Xiaoyan had finally advanced to the Sovereign Master realm. The 9 origin chains merged into a new origin chains that was as thick as a calf. A faint light flashed on it. It was like a jade that was incomparably clear. Although it was not as visual as before, the origin monarch key contained within were not something that the former could compare with. Just the origin monarch key contained within the chains were equivalent to all the origin chains contained within the 9 origin monarch key of the emperor. In fact, it was even more than that. Yi Tianqian walked forward and glanced at Xiaoyan, who was gasping for breath. He scolded him with a smile. Enough, stop complaining. You have experienced 8 storms in total, and you have only complained 7 times. Xiaoyan chuckled and said. Didn't you complain one more time? Yi Tianqian rolled his eyes at him and said in a cutting voice, that time, you fainted from the pain. Ah, but teacher, this damage to the soul is too much. In less than 2 months, the disciple's soul has already suffered a great deal of damage. Now, not to mention concocting pills, even a slight movement of my soul will cause severe pain. After thinking for a moment, Xiaoyan still couldn't help but say. What if he was caught in a battle? Then Xiaoyan would have to run away. Of course, can't escape her too. This is indeed a problem, but for you right now, this is a problem. It's not a big problem. When you go out, you just have to be honest and don't provoke any monarch emperor warriors or above. The key of those below the monarch emperor won't affect you at all. Xiaoyan couldn't help but roll his eyes and behave himself. How could he say that? There is another way. That is to make the prestige power spell absorb the energy needed for the first stage quickly. After that, it will enter a state of dormancy. During the period of dormancy, you need to raise your soul level as soon as possible. At that time, the impact will be smaller. Xiaoyan was delighted at first, but then he sighed helplessly. In the end, he still couldn't avoid suffering. At the mountain stream, Xiaoyan's legs trembled under the impact of a frightening flow of water. His footsteps became unstable and he violently fell into the bottomless river below, causing several meters tall waves to splash out. Again, in the next moment, the river was separated by a wave of brute force. Xiaoyan waved his hand and waved it. With a leap, the blue flame ruler once again stood on a smooth rock that was hit by the current. The blue flame ruler waved in his hand tightly, blocking the strong impact of the current. This time, it lasted a little longer than the previous time. When Xiao Yan felt a sore and soft feeling on his shoulder, the strength of the blue flame ruler's swing couldn't help but slow down. In an instant, it broke through the seal on the ruler's surface, and ruthlessly smashed into the river once again. In the distance, Yi Tianqian looked at the young man who had once again jumped out of the river and laughed lightly. The finger in his sleeve moved and a feeling of vicissitude immediately surfaced on his aged face. Within 3 days, a long time later, a soft sigh was emitted from his mouth. Xiao Yan was once again thrown into the river by the water. He was exhausted and floated up from the water. He touched his face and let the water carry him as it slowly drifted into the distance. After more than a month of cultivation, Xiao Yan's strength had completely stabilized at the level of a sovereign master. With the vast origin monarch key and blue flame ruler in his body, he was confident that he could defeat any ordinary 5 sovereign masters. If he counted the 9 cycles wind walk he cultivated, he would probably encounter a peak sovereign master. Xiao Yan was also very confident that he could escape. 3 years in the illusion realm, less than a year in the outside world. But his strength has increased by so much. Lying in the water, Xiao Yan raised a hand. Slowly clenching his fist, he began to feel the origin monarch key that had recovered a little in his body. Xiao Yan took a deep breath and narrowed his eyes as he looked at the dim sun in the sky. The sunlight shone on his body through the sparse branches and leaves, giving him a faint warmth. "Teacher, thank you." Xiao Yan raised his fist and involuntarily clenched it tightly. A soft sound of bones cracking was heard. Xiao Yan mumbled softly, and the determination in his eyes slowly faded. Boom! Another world-shaking explosion was heard in the distance. In an instant, a strong energy storm swept over. This river was like a frightened and furious dragon, roaring crazily. Waves of wind swept across, and crushed stones broke through the sky. Strong winds swept along the waves, slapping both sides of the river. Within this turbulent energy storm, the towering trees on both sides were uprooted and swept into the storm. They instantly turned into powder and scattered down. The nearby low mountain peaks were also struck by this destructive force. Immediately, boulders flew in all directions, and the sound of whistling wind could be heard without an end. Xiao Yan, who was in the river, still had a calm expression on his face. He allowed the powerful energy storm to sweep over him. When it came into contact with him, Xiao Yan's clothes turned into powder, and several bone-deep wounds instantly appeared on his body. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Yan clenched his teeth tightly. He didn't let out a cry of pain. Compared to the pain he had suffered in the clubhouse, the current pain could be said to be negligible. A faint black golden glow suddenly emitted from Xiao Yan's chest the moment his thoughts landed. Immediately, a palm-sized black golden word penetrated his body. It was like a black golden lightning bolt that surged into the energy storm that covered the sky and covered the earth. The moment the black golden word entered the energy storm, the destructive aura that permeated this area suddenly weakened. That frightening feeling immediately disappeared. Woo! Even though he was somewhat mentally prepared, the deep mental and rational pain that came from the depths of his soul still caused Xiao Yan to let out a miserable cry. His entire body trembled non-stop as he curled into a ball. His hands randomly struck the water, and low growls that were like wild beasts were continuously emitted from his throat. The prestige power spell did not only strengthen Xiao Yan's soul, it also strengthened his soul. It was endless pain, at least. Xiao Yan had only felt this kind of benefit when he was concocting the revival pill. And this kind of pain. He had already experienced it many times, and had wanted to wear a crown. He had to bear this kind of weight. Right now, Xiao Yan. He was completely focused on enduring the pain that he couldn't bear in his life. It was time to wear the crown. Before long, the energy storm gradually dissipated. Xiao Yan, who was covered in wounds, was currently lying in a pile of rubble, gasping for breath. He felt his soul, which seemed to be on the verge of dissipating. Xiao Yan couldn't help but smile bitterly. The damage of the prestige power spell on the soul. Although it wouldn't cause the soul to dissipate, this kind of pain. If it wasn't for Xiao Yan's tough nerves. Even so, he was afraid that Xiao Yan would have suffered from schizophrenia a long time ago. Xiao Yan could feel the anger in his chest that had nowhere to vent slowly forming. When will this day come to an end? Xiao Yan sighed bitterly and closed his eyes to recover. With the high-grade medicinal liquid that Elder Yi had given him, the scars on Xiao Yan's body quickly formed scars. In less than a day's time, they fell off and new muscles once again appeared. After the origin monarch key in his body recovered, Xiaoyan leapt up like a fish. He took out a black shirt from his interspatial storage ring and put it on. As he put it on, he muttered, "If this storm comes a few more times, this old man will have to cultivate naked." Just as he was muttering softly, the space around Xiaoyan suddenly distorted. In the next moment, Xiaoyan's figure suddenly disappeared. He glanced at the familiar limestone square. Xiaoyan's heart suddenly trembled, as if he had thought of something. With a perturbed mood, Xiaoyan met Elder Yi's gaze. "Get ready and leave the illusion realm." There were no twists and turns in his calm words, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. Xiaoyan was silent. What was supposed to come had come. Elder Yi had no ability to stop such a thing, nor did he have the ability to do so. Since that was the case, he would just let nature take its course. "I have already died 10,000 years ago. This time, I only died a little more thoroughly. Besides, with you, I can be considered as having a successor." The current Yi Tianqian, who was wearing a white robe and had white hair, had a carefree attitude, just like a few years ago. "Before I die, I will give you a word. If you want to make a name for yourself in this great world, you must have some truly powerful friends. One must have pride, but never arrogance. This is a lesson the teacher exchanged his life for." Yi Tianqian smiled helplessly. If not for his arrogance when he was alive, he wouldn't have used his skill as an alchemy saint master. When he was blocked by those fellows in Forest Domain, there wasn't a single Saint Origin stage expert that came to help him. Remembering Elder Yi's words in his heart, Xiaoyan took a deep breath and suddenly said, "Teacher, who was the one who attacked you back then?" At the end of his words, a trace of killing intent had already spread across Xiaoyan's chest. Elder Yi's eyebrows twitched, but he didn't immediately respond. After a long moment of silence, he let out a long sigh. His voice was somewhat hoarse as he said, "There are some things that you do not know right now. But I will become stronger." Xiaoyan said in a deep voice, his tone was filled with strong toughness. A smile gradually surfaced on the corner of Elder Yi's mouth. He glanced at the determined young man in front of him. Elder Yi gently smiled. He extended his hand and gently clenched it in the air. A nearly transparent origin bead suddenly appeared. This spiritual origin bead contains all the information the teacher knows. If you really have that intention, work hard in your cultivation. When you can break open this pearl, you can do whatever you want. If you can't, then in the great world in your eyes. Live peacefully, whether you have the ability to break the bead or not. Teacher wants you to live well, after all. This great world is still very interesting. Looking at the disciple who satisfied him, Elder Yi smiled and handed the spirit origin bead to the latter. "Little guy, if you finish reading the news, no matter what you do, teacher's soul in heaven will bless you." In the end, Elder Yi also said some ridiculous words. He quietly nodded. He knew that Elder Yi was doing this for his own good. Xiaoyan received the spirit origin bead. The moment the pearl entered his hand, an indestructible feeling rose within Xiaoyan's heart. His soul force tried to seep into it, but it was as if a stone bull had entered the sea and did not move at all. After keeping the spirit origin bead into the storage ring, Xiaoyan seemed to have thought of something. He softly said, "Teacher, your soul imprint." Chapter end. Hi guys, please like, comment, share, and subscribe.